Did Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, who has been placed on a leave of absence, disband the PKTT, that is the Political Killings Task Team, after it allegedly shook his ANC presidential ambitions by nabbing his alleged funder, Vusimuzi Cat Matlala? Was a ballistic report riddled with omissions for the benefit of alleged criminal cartel members, or was it merely a human error? And did the Hawks descend on the operation takedown of alleged cartel member Katiso KT Malefe for the purposes of verification, or were they attempting to allegedly interfere to shield criminal syndicates? These are the questions occupying the curious minds of the nation as the Madlanga Commission continues to probe allegations of criminality, political interference, and corruption in the criminal justice system. I'm Kani Mapanga, and this is the weekly Madlanga Wrap.
With taxi violence, the CIT, cash in transit, you'll find that there's one particular firearm that you see terrorizing a particular area. For example, you'll see the areas of Ivory Park, Tembisa. You'll see this particular firearm which has generated multiple hits, but the firearm is not recovered. We see that. And that tells you that there's one person who's actually terrorizing the area. In the ballistic language, when one is able to link a bullet with a firearm, that for us is a big plus for the case.
The Madlanga Commission kicked off its hearings with ballistics evidence, which exposed the deep links of the high-profile murders of musicians DJ Somebody, DJ Fintos, businessman Don Tindleni, and others through the AK-47 discovered at the Bromley scene. The Commission heard that a forensic analyst within Pretoria SABC, Captain Itumeleng Mukhotle, could not retrieve the serial number from one of the firearms, a 9mm Parabellum Taurus pistol that was linked to multiple high-profile murders at the Bromley crime scene, that was linked to the brutal murder of Amon Swart, the Vereniging engineer. A forensic analyst in KZN, however, successfully retrieved the serial number. Could it have been a deliberate cover-up, or was it a human error? Let's take a listen.
There are a couple of factors that can influence the person not to be able to retrieve the serial number. They include the training that the member received, specifically on the etching process. They include a person who is not willing to go extra mile, or who doesn't do more, who couldn't do more to try and retrieve the serial number. The other factors could be the chemicals that we are using. Maybe somehow, if the chemicals also are expired, or there can be a difficulty on getting the serial number. The other factor could be, or maybe the person deliberately omitting to do his job. Those are factors. One of those factors could have influenced the person not to retrieve the serial number.
Well, these discoveries are made amid a ballistic system that is riddled with challenges. To unpack this evidence, we are joined by Dr. David Klatso, a private consulting forensic scientist. Dr. Klatso, thank you so much for your time and joining us this afternoon.
My pleasure. Good evening to you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Dr. Klatso. We've seen that with organized crime being highlighted as a significant threat in our democracy. How do you have a critical unit such as this ABIS system not operating on real time in these cases where we see clearly have a strong links and often form part of the modus operandi of alleged criminal syndicates?
Okay, well, there's so much to say that one needs to start a little further back. Firstly, listening to that police officer say why he couldn't get access to the registration numbers, it can be downgraded to two factors. One, incompetence, one, dishonesty, and secondly, the police have specific protocols to make certain they don't use chemicals that are out of date. So if he's suggesting that that's a reason, it means that somebody hasn't done their work properly. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I saw in the introduction to this piece, someone was saying they wanted more police in the area. You actually don't want more police in the area, given the current state of dishonesty of the police force. Until we've got certainty that we've got honest police officers doing their job, and there are some, but there are many that aren't honest, and that is a major problem in the ongoing crime problem. Secondly, the ballistics unit, I would say, has gone beyond being broken. It has got to the point it is hardly worth the money that is spent on it. Because number one, I have documents here showing that 2 different officers from that unit derived completely separate results on the same firearm with the same case number. So I know of a number of such cases, and you've just highlighted a few more cases. So we've got that. Now, the other thing that this officer said was that once you've got a firearm which is linked to a number of crimes, it doesn't link a human being to those crimes at all. Firearms can be passed from one human being to another, and it would be half-witted of any criminal to be using the same firearm in different parts of the country, because it's a cast-iron defense. If they try and link it to him, they say, well, I wasn't there. I can prove that I was in Cape Town, or I can prove I was in Nelson Mandela Bay. So all it does is links the firearm. But also the head of that unit is working off a script that is 15 years out of date. He clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. And I'm afraid to say that until they do get some scientific input into that unit, the situation will only deteriorate, and will deteriorate even more rapidly than it is so doing.
And Dr. Klotzer, just for some clarity for our benefit, the clip that you see playing is a forensic analyst from the KZN lab that was able to retrieve the number, and he was reflecting on the possible reasons why Captain Mkhotla of the Pretoria labs could not retrieve that serial number. But speaking on that particular subject, the Commission has heard that Captain Mkhotla of the Pretoria labs made an initial report riddled with discrepancies that could harm the advancement of the case. Then he issues a second report that is backdated but corrects the discrepancies. What does this conduct signal to you as a forensic scientist?
Well, it's hard to determine whether this is corruption, stupidity, dishonesty, or all three. Very difficult. I don't know. And until I can't give you an answer to that question. But clearly, the level of competency of that forensic unit is next to zero.
And
I wouldn't believe a word. I checked it myself.
Indeed. And we heard from Brigadier Mkhabela, the head of the ballistics unit in SABC, when questioned and probed about these discrepancies and flaws. Of course, he mentioned a number of challenges in the system itself and the kind of human capital that they have and the kind of demand that outweighs the resources that they have within the system. But focusing on that particular difficulty to retrieve the serial number and, of course, the alleged omissions in the ballistics report, he seemingly reduced the discrepancies to a typo and highlighted that the linkage of the bullet from the body of Armand Swart to the firearm was a much stronger discovery. Was this a correct assessment of the problem?
Well, I don't know, because you went offline for half of your question.
May I repeat it for you, sir?
Please.
So essentially, Brigadier Mkhabela, the head of the ballistics unit in SABC, has stated that the omissions in the ballistics report, he reduced them simply to a typo. He then compared it to the finding from the autopsy of Armand Swart, which was able to link the bullet removed from his body to that of the firearm found on the Bromley scene. And he stated that this was a stronger discovery than those typos. Was this a correct assessment of the problem?
No, because you can't proceed if the paperwork is incorrect. The paperwork is crucial. If you get case numbers or
All right, it seems we have lost Dr. David Klotzer there, who was giving us a bit of information. Are you still with us, Dr. Klotzer?
I hope so.
You may continue with your question.
There was no question. All I'm saying is that if you have a situation where the paperwork is not correct, then it's a get out of jail free card. You cannot proceed in a court case with papers that are not matching and that are not correct.
Indeed.
It's the easiest thing. when you're on the defense side.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Dr. Klatter. We seem to be having difficulty with that connection, but essentially what he is highlighting is that there are some difficulties with that ballistic system, and if you don't have it functioning optimally and in real time, you minimize the success of the advancements on these cases, which are critical to the fight against organized crime. The fascinating world of ballistics was not all that the Commission had to offer. Witness C, a partially in-camera witness, returned to the remote stand with more allegations that placed a darker cloud around the likes of Lieutenant General Shadrik Sibia and Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, who has been placed on a leave of absence. All that and more on the other side of the break. All right, let's begin here. Prior to Witness C's return to the stand, the Commission heard evidence from a former PKTT member, that is Captain Maxwell Wanda, who described the presence of the Hawks at the Operation Takedown of Katiso KT Molefe as concerning. Two Hawks officials, that is Brigadier Lesiba Mukwena and Captain Barry Kruger, who had intimate knowledge of these events, were called to the stand to provide clarity. While the initial defense of a verification request seemed plausible, questions emerged from the Commission's bench after it was revealed that the Hawks knew that the Operation Takedown was legitimate prior to arriving at Molefe Sandhurst residence. And instead of withdrawing after learning this fact, the Hawks still proceeded in their numbers and were at the location for at least an hour. This order of events left more questions than answers. Let's take a listen.
That was my concern, that if you look at the timeline, at 1640 to 1650, so on page 9, from 1644 to 1652, by then there's communication within the group that this is a lawful SABC operation. It's the counterintelligence task team involved. They're appointed by General Khumalo. He is in charge. This is before Captain Kruger arrives at the scene, because he only gets there at 5 o'clock, according to his evidence. Yet it takes another hour for you to instruct the members to withdraw. I just cannot understand why, when it became clear at 1644, that this is a legitimate police operation, telephone calls were not made to Lieutenant General Khumalo to inquire from him whether the people at the address in Sandhurst are executing a lawful police operation. I don't understand why, after that information, the Hawks people still needed to go to the address and remain at the address for at least another hour. I just don't get that.
Meanwhile, Witness C's return to the stand remotely did not spare Police Minister Senzo Mchunu and Deputy National Commissioner for Crime Detection, that is Lieutenant General Shadrik Sibia. This as Witness C brought recordings which contained allegations made by alleged cartel member Vusimuzi Kat Madlanga in a name-dropping exercise following his March 2025 arrest. Witness C alleged that Madlanga spilled the beans on the alleged benefit Mchunu and Sibia enjoyed. This as he was frustrated that his alleged efforts did not shield him from arrest, nor did it safeguard his SABC contract to the tune of millions. Madlanga alleged that he made payments to Mchunu's campaign via the minister's alleged associate, Brown Mokhotsi. Let's take a listen.
In January, he had contributed to an amount, to the total amount of 500,000, whereby he purchased flight tickets and paid for the accommodation for the members of the ANC who were going to Cape Town for the July 8 statement for the ANC. So, and also that you will also refer back to his phones, where he will show us the messages between him and the person named Brown Mokhotsi pertaining those flight tickets and the accommodation payments.
To unpack this explosive evidence, we are joined by political analyst, Prof. Richard Pitthouse. Prof. Richard Pitthouse, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
It's always a pleasure.
All right. Well, we've started off with this explosive evidence that implicates Minister Mchunu again in these allegations of corruption and being in alleged cahoots with these alleged criminal cartels and syndicates operating within the Gauteng province. Many are on the edge of their seats, thinking that this is the end of Mchunu's political career. Is this conclusion too premature?
Well, I think it would be too premature for a number of reasons. One is that, at the moment, there's no final definitive findings. We have some extremely alarming allegations, but, people have not been cross-examined, evidence has not been forensically assessed. In many cases, it hasn't been provided yet, it's allegations. But we also know that people against whom real clear evidence has been brought in previous commissions, including the Zondo Commission, have not had their careers destroyed and often remain in office. So it would be too early to reach a firm conclusion on that.
Speaking on that subject, Prof. Pithouse, we know that there are individuals within that party who are currently still implicated in the Zondo Commission report. They haven't cleared their names with respect to that, and they are still thriving within the party's actual ranks. Based on what we know from the past, can we expect any form of accountability, even if there is those damning findings?
Look, commissions have been very useful in terms of bringing information into the public light. There's a lot of information in the Zondo Commission that was really important for South Africans to be able to know, and very important to have it in a kind of record that can be referred back to. But the recommendations made by that commission for prosecution, for further investigation, were not taken up. And we certainly can't be sure that in this case, something similar would not happen again. It's entirely possible that we could see the same movie twice.
And indeed, these allegations about the police minister, they speak more about his ambitions within the political party that is the ANC, alleging that this was some of the funds that were used to channel towards those presidential ambitions. What does that actually do for the optics of the ANC as a party that is trying to restore its image, and it's doing so amid these electoral losses and a changing political landscape? But of course, these allegations are quite damning to the point where the nation can't ignore the kind of information that is coming out of this commission.
Well, look, there's a lot of information about party political funding, about funding, electoral campaigns for parties, but also for individuals in parties who need a war chest sometimes to go to a party congress. That just isn't in the public domain, and we know that there are huge amounts of money that get circulated in our politics, and we just don't know where much of it comes from. We certainly have previously, it's not the first time, had allegations that money from very dubious sources is plugged into those processes. And it's not just the ANC, but to have these kind of concrete allegations naming, a specific person, a particular date, particular meeting, that is very, very damning in the public imagination. And you've asked if this is going to help or hinder the ANC's attempt to reconstitute its standing in the wake of massive public disquiet and anger about corruption. And it could play two ways. I mean, one is that the president could say, well, he's a reformer, allegations were made, he's dealing with them, he set up the commission, he's allowing the process to proceed unhindered. That could be a pitch to the public. But of course, what's coming out in that commission is not a good look for the ANC. There's no question about that. And, there's a much wider context in which people receive this information. Many people are aware of the extraordinary information that has come out about the Tembiso hospital, the looting of a public hospital. And many people have their ordinary, often local level experiences of political corruption, police corruption too. and they understand what they're hearing here through those experiences. So it is definitely very damaging to people's understanding of the integrity of our political class and of the police.
And lastly, as the nation continues to hear this evidence and joins the dots and some of the, I guess, the aftermath of these allegations, you can already see, as you've mentioned, with the Tembisa Hospital. It seems that, the ANC and the president's hands are tied at this point because you have to wait to test those allegations, but there seems to be an expectation from the public to at least act at this stage on the serious nature of the information coming out from the Madlanga Commission. Where does one strike the balance?
I mean, that's a really important question because for obvious reasons, there's been rapt public attention on what's happening at the Commission. And there's a lot of meaning is made, outside of spaces where reason and evidence are carefully weighed. A lot of people form opinions, on social media or through conversations with family members or people they work with, and people have very, very strong opinions about this whole story. But a lot of it is contested. There are people who have very strong views that go against the consensus. I mean, there are people who argue that the political killings task team had huge budgets, that they couldn't account for how they spent the money, that they didn't really get results, that it actually was a rational thing to shut it down. It's too early in the drama to have a full and proper conclusion about how it's going to play out. Clearly, if there is undeniable evidence that comes up, that is not just an allegation, it's not just someone making a claim, it's backed up by concrete material evidence, then the public would be within their rights to want action. But a lot of people have got swept up in a kind of emotional fervor about this and have formed very clear views for things that there isn't actually definitive evidence for. So it is a difficult balancing act. And I don't think there's a simple answer to your question, other than to say we need to be very mindful that not every allegation is definitive proof, and that it's a process. What someone says at one point may later be contradicted or challenged or changed in some ways by evidence that is provided at a later point. So we do have to let this play out. Once it's started, you have to let the process play out.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Prof. Pithouse, for your wonderful insights, highlighting there that we are still in the early stages of the Madlanga Commission. As you know, the Madlanga Commission is being heard in 3 different phases, and we're currently in phase 1 where the allegations are being mapped out. Of course, phase 2 will come where those who are implicated will get an opportunity to give their version of events, and I'm sure it will be tested there and we'll be able to reach conclusion on what the facts are surrounding these allegations of criminality, political interference, and corruption in the criminal justice system. That is all the time we have for you this week. The Commission is expected to continue its hearings at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. Join us at 5 p.m. next Sunday as we continue to join the dots and what will be revealed during this week's evidence.